Aspiring adventurers regularly put their lives on the line. It was obvious that they would prefer wealthier families who could provide at least some measure of support and comfort. Well, who cares? I've only just started. I'm sure if I keep inviting people, someone will want to join. On the contrary, the notion that a lone goddess would be able to secure recruits and everything else she might need within the city was absurd. To the children, it was obvious that there was nothing to be gained by serving under Hestia other than suffering. The truth was that here in Orario, and generally anywhere in the mortal realm, it was universally known that useless and irresponsible gods could be found everywhere, and it was common sense to avoid getting involved with them. With a family that was all talk, no plans, and no money, the young goddess had naturally been included in that merry band. In a word, she was not to be trusted. She continued to approach the children with her invitations until the sun went down, and was rejected by every person she encountered. How come I didn't get a single yes? Is this what life in the mortal realm is all about? Gaining the faith, or rather, the trust, of another was a difficult thing to do. For the first time, Hestia experienced just how unforgiving this new world could be. Wah, Hephaestus. Hestia, it hasn't even been a full day since I kicked you out. After spending a single night on the streets, Hestia decided she had no choice but to return, crying, to her friend. After undergoing her baptism of reality, Hestia threw away her pride and groveled before Hephaestus, and in the days that followed, she continued to beg for whatever generosity Hephaestus could spare. Hephaestus. Sometimes she claimed she had no money. Hephaestus. Sometimes she claimed it was impossible to find a job. Hephaestus. Sometimes she would appear soaking wet and with her head down, begging for shelter from the rain. Hestia, who had realized that she was helpless without her arcane, became a magnificent headache for Hephaestus. She couldn't continue to coddle her old friend, but she also couldn't let her fall into oblivion. At her wit's end, the scarlet-haired and scarlet-eyed goddess let out a deep sigh. This is a one-time thing, you understand. And then, fully aware that she was being too indulgent once again, she gave Hestia a place to live. In the basement of an old, shabby church at the end of a lonely, forgotten alley, there was a small, hidden room. Thanks, Hephaestus. This is seriously your last chance, okay? I mean, I gave you a lead on a part-time job too, so after this you're on your own. Standing in front of the church her dear and generous friend had led her to, Hestia nodded. All right. Once Hephaestus had turned and left with an exhausted sigh, Hestia ventured down into her new home, the basement of a half-ruined church. Ugh, what did Hephaestus put upon me? Hestia grumbled, looking at the state of the hideout. It couldn't even compare to the rooms she'd been given before. Paint was peeling off the walls, and cracks were beginning to appear underneath. A lone magic stone lantern hung from the ceiling. A few basic pieces of furniture, like a bed and a couch, had been knocked over, perhaps because Hephaestus had been friendly up until now, but they were clearly well used. No, I need all the help I can get. I just need to feel at home. Hestia yelled, mostly to convince herself, as she began to clean the room. She checked the magic stone items, starting with the faucet, and arranged everything to better accommodate her small body. By the time she was finished, night was beginning to fall outside. Hestia stood in the center of the room and surveyed her work as she caught her breath. It's kind of empty. The words came unbidden from her delicate lips. The room was cramped and should have felt almost claustrophobic, but Hestia couldn't help but think that there was plenty of room for just one person. I was used to being alone in the heavens, but Loki and Hephaestus's places seemed so lively and fun. She remembered the faces of the children, the members of those families. Although Loki's children treated her like a major nuisance, their happy expressions revealed their affection for each other. Meanwhile, Hephaestus's family clearly adored her, and she always had a ready smile. To them, and many of the other gods and goddesses Hestia had encountered so far, she seemed happy as well. somehow fulfilled. She had never seen any deity like this in the heavens. Damn it, I'm not alone. Even Hestia could tell how hollow those words were as they echoed off the walls of the cold basement. She lay still for a while. Then she turned off the magical light and climbed into bed. I wonder what the children of my family will be like. What kind of child would take her hand? Hestia undid the smooth thread that held her hair back and lay down on the bed, her thoughts still swirling. Loneliness and uncertainty resided within her, but there was also a bit of anticipation. Anyone who lived in the material world would have instantly recognized how Hestia felt as she pondered what tomorrow might bring. These emotions were confused and indistinct, even as they urged her forward to the future. With her mind still filled with such thoughts, the goddess Hestia closed her eyes. After this, Hestia's struggle began. This was the true beginning of her life in the mortal realm. Self-sufficiency was a basic requirement of life here. She had to be able to feed herself through her own efforts. Every attempt to seek out a family member who could help support her had failed, and her days were dominated by a chain of setbacks and defeats. With her omnipotent arcane sealed away, Hestia's life was filled with hardships, and her mind was completely occupied with what Hephaestus had called the harshness of the material world. This world also had diversions. It had novelties. It had delights. But most of all, Hestia was learning firsthand that she could also be painfully indifferent. When she made a mistake with the cooking equipment at the Jayaga Maru Kun stall where she worked, it ended with the entire place burning to the ground. After being saddled with a heavy debt for her disastrous mistake, she actually began to cry. But even amidst these tribulations, there were moments of good fortune. Hestia. Working hard as always, aren't you? You know what, take this potion. Wow. Thank you, as always, Mayak. There you go again, Lord Mayak, handing out our potions. It almost makes no sense to hand them out to a family with no adventurers. Mayak was known as a soft touch among the gods who led business-oriented families. Accompanying him was Natsa, a Chiantrop. Hestia had never met Mayak before he descended from the heavens, but as a member of the impoverished class, he and his family had helped her many times. You're Hestia. Wait, if you're here, that must mean, is that you, Take? Those clothes, don't tell me. Jayaga Maru Kun. Renewing her friendship with Takamikazuchi, a god she had known since her days in the heavens, and discovering that he also worked in the same potato chip business to stave off poverty also helped lift Hestia's spirits. Her other co-workers also adored and worried about her, thanks to her childlike appearance. In no time at all, half a year had passed since her arrival in Orario. Then, one bright day, 3 months after Hephaestus had kicked her out. Given up again. Hestia's 50th family invitation that day was declined. Her shoulders slumped. She had no idea how many children she had approached since arriving in Orario. When Loki stopped by her Jayaga Maru Kun tent just to mock her, Hestia had no way to fight back. Hestia trudged home, ruminating on another fruitless day, when her eyes fell on a certain boy. A human child, huh? He looks even worse than me, and that's saying something. His shoulders were slack like hers, and he shuffled listlessly down the street. His hair was pure white, like a rabbit's, or perhaps like freshly fallen snow. His eyes were a vivid rubellite, and he had a slender build. Watching him from behind, Hestia felt strangely drawn to the boy and decided to follow him. It was true that Hestia felt a certain kinship with anyone who struggled as much as she did, but it was the sadness she sensed in his expression that she couldn't shake. She followed behind him, staying out of sight. His clumsy attempt at stealth earned her judgmental glances from other pedestrians on the street, but she was able to deduce that the boy was looking for a family to join. She watched as he went from one family's home to another, knocking on their gates only to be immediately rejected. The boy appeared to be an aspiring adventurer, but his obviously rustic appearance meant that he would be rejected out of hand, without even being allowed to meet the family's god. As Hestia took all this in, she wondered, is this my chance? She couldn't help but hope that he was someone who might accept an invitation into her family. Even from a distance, Hestia liked what she saw. He seemed unsophisticated, shy, and above all, pure of heart. She had the feeling that his soul was as immaculate as his hair. Unable to keep calm, Hestia crept closer with a few rather unseemly hops. Still, I must say, as she continued to watch the boy from behind as he blended into the crowd, Hestia found it quite a lonely sight. Hestia, on the other hand, was filled with anticipation and eagerness at the prospect of finally recruiting a follower. He was truly a child, fundamentally different from a deity like her who would live forever. She watched the helpless boy closely as he searched for a place to belong. As if I could just abandon him when he's making that kind of face. Hestia was the goddess of the hearth, the patron deity of the light that protected the home. The eternal flame that offered salvation to those who prayed and welcomed lost and wounded children. And with an undoubtedly lost child right before her eyes, Hestia raised her voice. "Hey! You there!